Hello chess friends and welcome to Zardo's chess channel and welcome to the Magnus Carlsen Chess Tour in 2020. We're now in the day 4 in which Magnus Carlsen again played against Liren. So the result after 3 days was 2 winning games for Magnus, 1 winning game for Ding. So in order to make it maybe to the 5th day, Liren had really to win this match game because if he loses this one, then of course Magnus Carlsen is the winner of the complete match game. So in the finals is of course Hikaru Nakamura, who played really some great chess so far. He outplayed Daniil Dubov with a clear result of 3-0. It was a little bit surprised because at least I've expected that Dubov will win at least one match game, but Hikaru, as I said, played really great games and he's expecting now the winner of this match game between Magnus Carlsen and Ding. So we're now, as I said, in the game 4. So far the result after three games was equal, so who wins this game will be the winner of the day 4. So we're starting again round 4 and fight. So here Ding opened with the move d4, knight to f6, we have c4, and after e6 sort of a Nimzo Indian setup idea by Magnus, we have g3, the Catalan opening. And the Catalan opening is one of the most dynamic openings that you can play as white, at least against this positional setup of blacks. In the game, Magnus played d5, closes the light course. We have bishop to g2 and now bishop to b4. D takes c4 can be always met with some queen to a4, queen takes c4 idea. So that's why Magnus plays this fast developing style with bishop to b4, attacking the king, and now bishop to d7. Bishop to e7, it can be a surprise for you, this maneuver of the bishop, so first giving the check and then retreating with the bishop, but it's a common idea of Nimzo Indian, Bogo Indian defenses. The idea is always to leave this bishop on a weird square. It's not a good position for the dark square bishop of white, so you see white has already played a tempo with the bishop. Now bishop to e7 here is also a normal move for black. Now basically in order to improve this position, white needs another tempo in order to get it somewhere, at least with some kind of an activity. So the bishop on d2 is not a good move, not a good setup. Of course it can be improved, but so far it's not a good piece. So here knight to f3, we have castling, also by Ding. We have c6. Magnus builds a very firm pawn structure on light course, sort of a semi-Slav setup. It's not a semi-Slav because the Catalan was played, but as a pawn structure, it's common in this semi-Slav defenses. The idea in some occasions of blacks here is if white doesn't activate his pieces too much, then a positional idea can be always d takes c4 followed with b5. We're trying then to hang on to our pawn majority on the queen side. In the game, that's why Ding played queen to c2. He wants now, after d takes c4, queen to c4, then white will continue with this 2 centralized pawns against 1 centralized pawn, and then sort of the main idea would be to push the pawn on e4 and get a very powerful pawn central control. So here b6 played by Magnus. And this is a very important move now in this setup. It gives at least black some kind of a flexibility to crack the position with the move c5. At least we're developing the light square bishop. We can also remaneuver the knight to d7. This b6 is much better instead of maybe knight to d7. You see, then you're blocking out your bishop. So here with the move b6, you have at least a certain flexibility in the game. Magnus plays the move knight to e5. Pardon me, Ding plays the move knight to e5. It prevents, at least now for a while, this knight to develop somewhere, because wherever the knight goes, we can take this pawn on c6, and then also d takes c4 would be a risky choice because also the c6 would be hanging immediately. So in the game, bishop to b7 played by Magnus, we have c takes d5 played by Ding, and after c takes d5, rook to c1. So Ding has played so far a great development. He has occupied the c file, which is very important in the game. Magnus tried knight to d7, and we have now knight to d3. A better idea here for Ding would have been to simply stay with the knight here. Here queen to c7 leads now white into a really comfortable game, because whatever you do, if you try queen takes c7, rook to c7, this rook comes very active into the game. You have to move the bishop somewhere. Knight to e5 is not an option because you simply lose the bishop on b7. still you have to move somewhere the knight, and the rook is hanging, so it's not an option. So what you could do maybe here after queen to c7 is a bishop to a6 idea, but I think knight to e7, queen to e7, and now e4 is really splitting pawn moves, because there is one problem in these setups, like in this one. So as I said, queen to c7 wasn't played, knight to d3 was played by Ding, so the queen to c7 would be a great move, I think, in white's continuation. There is one problem for both sides, as I mentioned, in this position. So black and white cannot create really some dynamics in the center. So pushing pawns on e5 and e4 is a very risky choice, even if you can protect everything. Of course, so far from white's perspective, you cannot play the move e4, but even if you could, that's really a positional problem, because after something like e takes d4, and let's imagine now trades of bishops, you always risk the position that you will continue the game with an isolated pawn on d4. The same thing for black. Even if black in some occasions could really push the pawn on e5 to create some kind of a dynamic in the center, then you see, then you risk to leave yourself an isolated pawn on d5. So far the position in the center is static. You cannot do anything in the center. One of the main ideas of these types of setups, in the static center setups, is to occupy somehow maybe the e5 here, c5 squares, c4, e4 squares, in order to make some kind of an expansion, maybe some outposts on this square. So far, of course, for white, they're not possible here on c5, but if you maybe split some pawns, then the knight could maybe occupy this very weak c5 square. So as I said, pushing pawns is not an option. Outposts are really the main strategical elements here in the game. So knight to c6, we have e3. You see, even if we could have protected this pawn, bishop to c3 and then e4, still you're continuing the game with an isolated pawn. So rook to c8, knight to c3, we have knight to f5. As I said, the main idea by Magnus is to occupy this weak c4 square. So queen to d1. If you try something like b3 in order to prevent this, then you get bishop to a3, kicking away the rook, and also we could follow with bishop to a6, attacking also this knight on d3. So that's why Ding doesn't want to weaken his pawn structure on the queen side. He plays simply queen to d1, which is so far a good setup, because Ding remaneuvered the queen but still has this very important rook connection. So Ding has really an advantage now on the c file because Magnus cannot compete now with both of these rooks on the c file. He's a little bit stuck here. His pieces don't have so many squares to play. So here Ding played really a great queen maneuver to d1. We have knight to c4 and now bishop to e1. Simply retreating, the knight on d3 is protecting, of course, the pawn on b2. Still, we have opportunities, of course, in long terms to kick away this knight. So this knight, so far outposted here, but it's not fixed. It's not one of these knights that you cannot kick away, because sometimes in some occasions we could make a positional mistake and play something like b4, where we have advanced both of these pawns, maybe the pawn on b4 and also here on d4. So then you see you cannot kick away this knight on c4 with some pawns. So far it's still a possibility, but as I said, so far it's not necessary, because this knight cannot, of course, create some damage just alone. So here in the game, knight to d6 played by Magnus. We have a4. A very important move now for Ding, and he shows how great of a positional understanding he has, because sometimes in chess we don't know where to attack, and here Ding shows his attacking skills, because all of our pieces are basically coordinated here to the queen side, all of the pieces of white. So that's why our attack should be simple on the queen side, not to push pawns here, something like f4, f5, g4. So our attack has to be really on the queen side, because the pieces are showing us the direction of the attack. So a5 played by Magnus, we have knight to b5. If you take knight takes b5, then you get a takes b5, and after something, maybe a trade of rooks, we have knight to f6, but now still white can continue to push here with the move b4, and after a takes b4, knight takes b4 would be a great move here for white, so cementing the knight on c6. If you take, then white is continuing the game, of course, with a powerful bishop pair. So That's why after the move knight to b5, rook takes c1, played by Magnus. Rook takes c1, we have queen to b8, and now b4. Anyway, by Ding simply continuing his attack. On the queen side, we have knight to c4 again by Magnus. B takes a5, and now b takes a5. Now finally e4, but now this move is possible because this knight is of course protected by the pawn on d5, so after d takes e4, we could take the knight. So that's why here Magnus tried knight to b6, he regroups, he gets his knight compact in this very nice setup. We have e takes d5, and now bishop to d5. Bishop to d5, e takes d5, and now a very good move here by Ding, knight to e5, because if you take knight takes e5, then d takes e5, and that's what I'm talking about. Outposts, outposts, outposts. So you see how these ideas came through for both sides. The outpost on c4, the outpost on e5. But if you take now here the knight on e5, you see d takes e5 will happen. After maybe queen to e5, we could simply take this pawn. And I think that white has a comfortable game, as white has this distant pass pawn. I think that white will be faster with this pawn here on the a file. So if you don't take the pawn on e5, if you don't react, then you risk that you continue the game with an isolated pawn, and white will simply improve the position with the move f4, will fix his pawns, and the d5 pawn would be really a long-term weakness. So that's why after the move knight to e5, queen to b7 was played, and now bishop takes a5. Great move by Ding, which he realized, because if you take knight takes a5, then you get rook to c7. If the queen retreats here, then rook to a7, and we'll simply take the knight. We have of course one pawn up, and still this very powerful knight, outposted knight. So Magnus Carlsen realized this problems after the move bishop to a5, and played this risky bishop to g5. So here Ding realized his tactics. He's played now the correct move. Bishop takes b6, and after bishop to c1, he has this intermezzo, bishop to c5, attacking the rook. Rook to a8, played by Magnus, and now knight takes c4, d takes c4, and now queen to c1, played by Ding. And now Ding has here a comfortable game. The evaluation is +2 or something for Ding, so white is winning in the game. Rook to a4, played by Magnus, but now knight to c3, and now rook to a5. And here comes really the critical moment of the game. Here Ding played huge blunder. He played the move h4. So I want you to pause the video and find now the winning move here for Magnus. He saw of course that move. Let's see the move. So finish him. Try to see this winning move for Magnus. It's, I think, easy to see. It's a great move, because Ding opened the position in front of the king too much. Here Magnus of course realized the possibility of the move queen to a8. So the threat is immediately rook to a1. Also, if you get somewhere with the queen, maybe queen to d2, then you see rook to a1. You have only one square with your king, and then you get queen to h1, the checkmate. So a better idea, instead of this h4 move, would have been here maybe knight to e2 by Ding Liren. If queen to a8 now happens, then we have queen takes c4, and if you try rook to a1, you see we can play knight to c1, and everything is perfectly fine. Everything is protected. We don't have any more troubles. And as I said, this is a winning continuation here for white. White has this very nice pass pawn. But Ding made the mistake h4, queen to a8, and now queen to b2, rook to a1. We have knight to b1, and now c3, played by Magnus, deflecting the queen from the knight. There's nothing you can do. Queen to b3 was played by Magnus, by Ling, and now h6. Here Magnus of course creates some breathing space. Still he can hang on to this position. In the game we have d5, and now queen to c8, played by Magnus. If you retreat somewhere with the bishop, that's the main problem. You get c2, and it's game over here. So that's why after the move queen to c8, king to g2 was played, queen takes c5, knight takes c3, and now rook to a8, played by Magnus. Okay, Ding has of course the knight and the pawn, But this position could be playable if this pawn, for instance, would be on the e file and all of the pawns would be connected. Then maybe, just maybe, this could be a draw. But now, because of these weaknesses in front of white's king, this is a winning continuation here for black. Knight to e2 was played. We have rook to d8, knight to f4, queen to d4, h5, and now after queen to e5, queen to b6, and now rook to b8. Very nice move by Magnus after queen to e4, king to h3, and now rook to b1, threatening really some dangerous checks here on h1. So that's why Ding had to escape here to g4. But now f5 played by Magnus, and in this position Ding resigned because there's nothing you can do. You can play h3, king to h3, king to h4. The same thing will happen. Rook to h1 is a checkmate. So I'm not sure what to say. It was a great game by Ding, I believe. He found really great tactics in the static position, had a really completely winning endgame, but missed really only this move, and loses now, of course, the whole match game. If he would have won this game, the result would have been equal after 4 days. So today they would have played another match game in order to see who is really better. Now Ding is out, and Magnus Carlsen will meet, of course, Hikaru Nakamura in this super final. So okay, great match game between the two of them. I really enjoyed, although Ding lost, but I think he played really great chess against Magnus, who is of course the best player now these days. If you want to see more games played in this tournament, check out my link. Here's the link of this analyzed games so far. And if you if you want to see the best chess games in history, you can also check out my best chess games of all time series. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.